Builders could be banned from selling new houses as leasehold properties in England under proposals put forward by the government today. It comes after it emerged that some housing developers have been selling the leasehold onto investment firms without always telling homeowners, leading to extra costs or rising charges. Well, the government says there is a particular problem in the northwest of England where houses were being sold on leasehold, although it's not clear why. The Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, has said enough is enough as he set out how he plans to tackle the issue.
Now, I think everyone understands when you buy a flat, for example, why it's sold on leasehold. It has these shared common spaces. But what we're talking about here are houses. Houses that are being sold on leasehold, thousands of them, for no good reason. And then once they're sold, the people that have purchased them are exposed to these ever-increasing ground rents. It's not acceptable, it's wrong, enough is enough, and we're taking action.
What support do you hope you'll be able to provide for those who are in a situation where they're trapped in a house they can't sell because of this?
Well, there are already cases here, I think some million people that have bought houses on those kinds of terms, and we do want to see through this consultation what we can do to help them. I mean, one thing that's already happening from the industry is that those responsible developers are already taking action on themselves and seeing what they can do, but I want to go further than that. So, for example, we set out ideas around improving their rights of redress, making sure they have more consumer protection, but I also want to hear other people's ideas. I don't have all the answers to this. This is a complex issue. There are people out there, particularly some of the people that are in these situations. I want to hear from them what they think we can do that would really help them.
So that's the Community Secretary. Well, MPs have described leaseholds as the PPI of the house building industry. Some of the examples the government cited include a homeowner being charged £1,500 by the freeholding company to make a small change to their family home. A family home which is now impossible to sell because the ground rent's expected to hit £10,000 a year by 2060. And a homeowner who was told buying the lease would cost £2,000, but the bill came to £40,000. Let's talk to our business presenter, Ben Bland, to explain more. Some astonishing figures there. I mean, really quite alarming. Just outline the scale of the problem as you see it.
Well, according to the figures, there are some 4 million people who live in properties where they own the lease but not the freehold. The vast majority of those are in flats, blocks of flats, but at least a third of them are in houses, which is why the government wants to do something about this. And as we heard from those examples, it can prove to be very costly. And the reason being that when you buy a lease, you're buying the right to occupy that property for a set amount of time, be it 99 years to 999 years. The difference from owning the freehold is that when you own the lease, you don't own the ground that the property is built on. And in blocks of flats, that can be convenient because, you know, one company owns the land and individual people in the flats own the lease to each flat. When it comes to a house, if you don't own the land on which the house is built, that leaves you very open to whoever does own it putting up the ground rent. If you look at the lease, you can find that it's built in. It progressively goes up year after year or decade after decade, which is how you get those examples that you were talking about. But even simple modifications, the freeholder can then say to anyone who owns the lease, yeah, fine, go ahead, make those changes to your house, but you need permission to do it. And to do that, we're going to charge you. I mean, I know people who live in leasehold houses. They were told, for example, sorry, you're not allowed to put a satellite TV dish on your roof because that's not what the look we want for the area the houses are in. So this is why the government's trying to do something about it, because these costs and these restrictions. It can also be a problem if you come to try and sell the house, because there can be a charge for assigning the lease to someone else, and the freeholder can charge however much they like, pretty much, to, you know, for you to sell on the property, which can hold up sales and cause people problems.
So the government trying to address some of these abuses, and what about those people who are already, you know, in this situation right now?
Well, the Communities and Local Government Secretary, Sajid Javid, said that they're looking at measures to help people who are in this situation, as well as banning this practice in future. He said that there are a number of house builders have set up compensation schemes, and he was also going to look into ways that people could seek redress from solicitors who didn't actually spot the clause when they were going through the conveyancing process. And he put it like this. He said, you know, when you buy something, you know, you should be able to assume that it belongs to you. He said, you don't go and buy sausages only for the butcher to send you an annual invoice for the next 100 years. He said, you don't go buy bucket and spade and then be charged a transfer of ownership fee when you hand it to your kids on the beach. So he's just saying, you know, if you buy something, you have the right to assume that you own it.
All right, Ben, thank you very much indeed. Well, listening to that is Dudley Joyner, who's the Managing Director of a Leaseholder Association, which represents owners of leasehold flats. Thank you very much for being with us. And we were just hearing there from Ben Bland, yeah, the government saying when you buy something, you do think it is yours. That's the essence of this, isn't it?
Yes, of course. And again, I think as the Secretary of State has stressed throughout, this focus is on leasehold houses who sit on their own freehold land, and there's no justification at all for selling them leasehold. When it comes to flats, yes, as you rightly point out, they have to be sold leasehold because individual owners can't collectively or can't individually own the land that it sits on. But I think the point that I want to make here is you don't buy a property, a house, like you buy a loaf of bread. There is a process that you go through. It involves the person that's selling you the property, the developer or an estate agent, who have responsibilities under consumer rights legislation because leases are consumer contracts. And then in the legal buying process, you have a solicitor or a professional conveyancer who has advised you about the purchase. So questions have to be asked here. What has gone wrong with this process? How is it these individuals have got into this situation, find themselves owning a property with all these various draconian clauses in leases which now prevent them from selling that property on? Do they have claims back against solicitors or the estate agent for not being open and transparent when they bought the property?
And you're clear, are you, there have been and are abuses of this whole system?
Yes, absolutely. The whole idea of leasehold, if it's a 999-year lease and has a peppercorn rent or a very small ground rent, I don't think anyone would criticise that. But what is happening here is that the lease terms are reduced right down to 99 years. The rents, the annual ground rents are draconian, doubling every 10 years or more, so that instead of paying hundreds of pounds, you end up paying thousands of pounds. That cannot be right, as the Secretary of State has made clear.
So the government planning a ban on leaseholds on new build houses. What is your view on that?
I think if that's the only way of curbing these abuses, then maybe that has to be necessary. It's a shame, though, that the industry itself can't discipline itself to prevent these practices without there being a formal ban. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
All right, Dudley Joyner, thank you very much indeed. Dudley Joyner, there, Managing Director of the Leaseholder Association.